you understand your buyer persona and you understand where they're looking for information or where they're looking just, in their spare time, that's an opportunity. So I'm a big fan of LinkedIn. That's obviously the business social media, right? So I mean, that's where a lot of our buyers, in my opinion, are spending some of their time because we can talk about either trade shows we attended or specific case studies that we have and really promote our technical expertise. Whereas there's also an opportunity to maybe leverage some other areas just to make brand awareness a little bit higher, right? I don't think that the users on Facebook are trying to read a long form type of content about why this product is better in this setting. However, if they see your name and then they have an issue come up, there could be an opportunity there.
You are listening to Power Marketing with Kevin Lee. Kevin and his agency Did It have helped thousands of businesses win through superior marketing, as have his books, articles, speaking engagements, and the E-Marketing Association Power Marketing podcasts. Here's Kevin.
I'm Kevin Lee with the E-Marketing Association. My day job, or most of my week, is spent running Did It, 50-person digital marketing agency that does traditional work as well. I also own a brand, Truth Nutrition, that I bought a little over a year ago to run experiments that no sane client would ever let me run, so I could see whether they worked or not and then deploy the results. I also run a nonprofit, Giving Forward, as well as an incubator, which isn't even on the list behind me. Super excited to be chatting today with Wyatt Link, who runs most of marketing for a company called the Hiller Companies. It's actually an organization that has several companies in it. So I wanted to tap his brain a little bit on what's working for in marketing these days. But let's start first, Wyatt, with folks who aren't familiar with Hiller and the subsidiary brands. What is it that you guys do?
Well, thanks, Kevin. I appreciate you having me. And Hiller is a fire protection life safety company. Our goal has been laser focused on providing fire protection and life safety and preserving lives and property worldwide for over 100 years. We're a full service provider with over 40 locations across the United States, and we're growing. So it's exciting to sit down and speak with you. We've got some really exciting things we're doing in areas like special hazards, battery energy storage systems, marine applications, and more. So look forward to hearing your feedback about some of these things as well.
Cool, absolutely. So most of your channel, I guess, is B2B, but I guess you also do some B2C. So for B2B marketers who have sort of potential channel conflict, because you might have products that end up getting sold by resellers or distributors or whatever, and then it may be possible for some folks to buy directly. But since you've got these sort of channels to deal with, how do you think B2B marketers should think about allocating their energies and their budgets across making sure that their brand is well known by the end buyer, right? Who could just be another business, could be B to B to B, right? Versus for the supporting the distributors.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think the way that I approach that is understanding the channels that you interact with these customers and trying to map out a customer journey, right? So it can be very difficult if you don't have a lot of data to support that, but try and understand, okay, if these customers are your most profitable, this is where you're going to grow from. Understand where they're looking for information. How can you get in front of them? How can you show that your solution is the solution? And work backwards from that kind of journey and that map, right? So for us, we're very focused on the B2B side. We do a little bit of B2B to B, where we have Hiller Water Mist, which is one of our OEM products. That's a water mist fire suppression system. But a lot of what we do, we work with other OEMs as distributors, and we are a service provider. So our focus mostly on that B2B interaction and really understanding what can we do to get in there and help with the service component, and then if we can grow with other products that we distribute as well.
So one thing you mentioned in your previous answer was this idea about knowing who your most profitable customers are, right? Because obviously there's an average customer who doesn't even exist, right? There's no such thing.
Yeah.
But in the numbers, it looks like there is. And then once you start to dig through the numbers, you start to identify these, whatever it is, an 80-20, 90-10, or power curve rule, where these customers that have an inordinate impact on profitability. And obviously you want more of those. So, are there any examples that you can think of without disclosing any proprietary information of where you've looked at a data set and you've said sort of, wow, I can't believe that these, X percent of customers are so valuable to the business?
Yeah, I think the way that I would approach that is if we can provide our full portfolio. So if you can really grow your share of wallet with that customer, I think those are going to be your best opportunities. So it's extending what you're available or what you're able to provide to those customers in your portfolio of products, right? So if you get in and you're able to do, let's say, a fire protection system like sprinklers, and they also need extinguishers, make sure that their spend on extinguishers is coming to you so you can build that
Right.
out, right? So depending on the industry and depending on in our industry, it's highly regulated. So different locales have different regulations. So understanding what those are and providing that value in each area, that's a big differentiator for us. So if we have particular expertise in a market and then there's a new entrant who's competing against us who may not know that market as well because of those regulations, that's an opportunity for us. So if you really get in there and stay in there and, like I said, not only get the initial spend that you got in the door with, but then broadening that to really offer your full portfolio.
Now, if I remember correctly, you guys have actually made a bunch of acquisitions to become sort of more full service and have more breadth of
Hmm.
offering to folks. And has a lot of the decisioning around that been this idea of share of wallet? Like if you had more things to offer, you could increase, that share of wallet from the specific customers.
Yeah, most definitely, right? If we're in a particular geographic area and we only provide, let's say, extinguishers, and then there's an opportunity for an acquisition that maybe does sprinkler or fire alarm, that would be a very complementary company to add to our portfolio. So then you can
Right.
have that full offering within that geographic area. So that's certainly an example. There are obviously some other ones in particular markets that you're looking to grow in, depending on what their expected spend is or what their growth looks like. So if you can get into that type of an application, like a special hazards or energy storage, those are exciting. But again, within that geographic area to make sure that you have that full kind of share of wallet, that's the opportunity.
Right. Right. So I'd love to touch on something that I think is not as well understood within B2B marketing as it should be, and I think we're all learning as we go, which is the idea of social media in a
Hmm.
B2B context. Whenever you sort of typically see social media covered in the press, they're usually covering it from the perspective of B2C marketing.
Hmm.
But yet, B2B marketers, we're marketing to humans the same way
Yep.
that a B2C marketer is.
Hmm.
So I'd love to hear your thoughts on, where social media fits into B2B marketing.
I think that goes back again, partly to that customer journey, but as well as like to your persona, right? If you understand your buyer persona and you understand where they're looking for information or where they're looking just, in their spare time, that's an opportunity. So I'm a big fan of LinkedIn. That's obviously the business social media, right? So I mean, that's where a lot of our buyers, in my opinion, are spending some of their time because we can talk about either trade shows we attended or specific case studies that we have and really promote our technical expertise. Whereas there's also an opportunity to maybe leverage some other areas just to make brand awareness a little bit higher, right? I don't think that the users on Facebook are trying to read a long form type of content about why this product is better in this setting. However, if they see your name and then they have an issue come up, there could be an opportunity there. So our strategy is more focused on the LinkedIn side, but I do see other social medias as having opportunity because, like you said, whoever's buying from you, they're doing a lot of stuff in their time that's not at the office, and they're anything like me, they're on their phone a good bit.
Yeah, that actually dovetails really well into my next question, which is that in the categories that you serve, it seems like education plays a really key role because a person can't even make the right decision unless they have enough information about, themselves and what their needs are, as well as what's out there to potentially satisfy those needs. So, you don't usually think about marketing as owning education,
Hmm.
as it relates to how a product is potentially used, but if the person can't figure that out, then they can't make the right decision. So I'd love to, talk about content creation best practices and, how that helps potentially product fit or situational fit for your customers making their decisions.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, particularly as I mentioned, we're a highly regulated industry.
Right.
So a lot of those regulations stem from regulatory advisory bodies like the National Fire Protection Association. And we have members of our organization that sit on some of those code committees and councils that'll talk about, hey, what's the current challenge that we're facing and how should we try and give guidance to the industry about this? And then we make sure that we utilize that as we develop our standard operating procedures. And then we communicate that to our potential customers about, are you in compliance with, let's say,
Hmm.
NFPA 855, which has to do with the battery energy storage systems? Are you in compliance with NFPA 409, which happens to be about maintenance repair operations in aircraft hangars? And those are opportunities for us to really educate and speak to maybe the facilities manager who they've got 100 things they have to do. maybe one
Right.
of them is the fire compliance. We can take
Yeah.
that off their plate and say, hey, this is what you really need to be aware of, and this is why we provide that as value to you.
Are there implications where, as a result of a better deployment of fire safety, that folks end up actually saving money on insurance and other sort of positive benefits like that?
Most definitely, right? We don't have a specific case study out about some of those things, right? Because a little bit of it is proprietary, but the
Yeah.
idea definitely holds. And even in some instances, if you structure it in one way and you utilize, let's say, a medium like a foam medium, right? If you have a false positive and you have a release, that's hundreds of thousands of dollars of product that you've used that went off that maybe could have been mitigated while still providing safety. So like
Yeah.
those are opportunities that, hey, if you build the system in mind with saving life, preserving property, all of those things, it
Yeah.
doesn't have to be this exact system. And if it does go off, it's a much smaller amount that you have to recoup instead of paying for that. So that's kind of an example, I think maybe relates to what you're talking about.
Yeah.
But yes, if you're able to follow that guidance and you can go back to the insurer and talk about this is UL listed or whatever it is, that's a huge opportunity.
Right. Right. So one place people learn is trade shows and events and conferences. So obviously, a lot of them took a significant hiatus during the pandemic, but a lot of them were also back, and some of them are back sort of almost like exactly like they were before, and some of them
Mm-hmm.
are sort of, struggling with hybrid, or things are sort of coexisting in a sort of online event versus offline event. So I'd love to hear how you think things have changed since sort of the new normal on
Yeah.
events.
I would say that a few years ago, right after COVID was kind of finishing, that you could see that there was a dip in attendance. I feel like the last two or three shows I've been to, that's starting to come back. While to your point, there's opportunities to kind of merge that as a hybrid opportunity, right? So if you can physically get there, I think there's a tremendous amount of value of, shaking hands, spending time with each other, talking about your newest product or your service, and then networking within that specific trade show or that organization. However, I do think that people are becoming a little bit more focused on where they're going. So maybe going to less shows, but more people go to that particular show. So I'm
Right.
curious to see over time if the competition means that the best shows get the most attendance and there's less amount of shows,
Hmm.
or if some of these other ones have to say, hey, we're going to do webinars for 3 quarters and then 1 quarter we have a meeting about those webinars, something like that. So
Yeah.
we're still certainly thinking that trade shows are a big part of our strategy, and we're going to go exhibit at the ones that we think are the best value. But what I've noticed is that some seem to have higher attendance than others, and I don't know if that's just competition or if that's industry wide.
Right. Right. You've got a bunch of different brands. Some of them lean a little bit more heavily into service, others more towards product. Um, Marketing KPIs are going to be different, right? For service-centric businesses versus
Yep.
product-centric businesses.
Hmm.
Or sometimes it's a product and then install, but then post-install, there's no service. Other times it's the whole gamut, right? The buy,
Hmm.
the install, and the ongoing service. So as somebody in charge of making sure the marketing dollars go where they should go, how have
Hmm.
you structured your KPIs to reflect those different types of customer relationships?
Yeah, a great question. I think one of the ones that we try and focus on is that customer satisfaction, and you can utilize that throughout a few different channels or product offerings. For us, like I said, service is really the biggest component of that. We really want to focus on that area. So if we can ensure that the customer is satisfied when we're providing that service, we can do, a customer CSAT score or something like that.
Right.
That's going to allow us to determine, hey, is this a happy customer? Are we able to continue working with them? Is that somebody that we need to spend a little bit more time with? Maybe we dropped the ball, we fixed something, whatever that looks like. On the product side, it's a bit of a longer turn because it's often used in construction. So you're going to know that you're designing it up front. And I think the customer satisfaction score is a similar type of metric, but it's a little different because it's not like immediate service, hey, fill out this survey. It's as we were developing specs, were we responsive? Were we able to interact with you? Did the right product get there at the right time? And were we able to actually continue on the project timeline? So I like to think of it in that metric to determine where are we spending our time to figure out, great, are these customers going to be our best customers? Are we taking care of our best customers? But again, yeah, the ROI calculation on the marketing spend should be a little bit different on those. And to understand that, honestly, we got to capture a little bit more data.
Yeah, you got me thinking about sort of data capture as it relates to sort of where people are in their buying journey, right? I
Hmm.
mean, obviously, things like search, whether it's organic search or paid search, are really great for sort of demand harvesting or capturing when the person raises their hand and has a clearly focused question that they're trying to answer, or a clearly focused problem that they're looking for a solution on. And
Hmm.
that's sort of the easy stuff, right?
Sure.
Something triggered their need and they're expressing that need
Hmm.
to, a Google or Bing, and now even to an AI, right?
Right.
ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini. Um, and so that's sort of the easy stuff, even though it's not always easy allocating budget across
Sure.
that. At least the
Yeah.
person's raised their hand. But when you're in an education-centric business, you've got sort of that mid-funnel and upper funnel. Like upper funnel is more like branding and awareness, but then that
Sure.
mid-funnel is very educational. So I'd love to think about, discuss a little bit how you think about, should you like max out your demand harvesting budget first and then like start moving into mid and upper funnel, or should
Hmm.
you always be branding as well?
Well, I think branding is super important, like you had mentioned, right? Like the awareness, you want people to know who you are because when they do have that trigger, they're going to be like, oh, hey, I've heard of them. They've done that,
Uh,
right? So
yeah,
I think that that is super important. What I think is very important also as we start to grow and we acquire some of these other companies and things and build them in, make sure that we are capturing and harvesting that demand as exists today, right?
right,
There's a lot of players in the industry, so you're maybe not going to capture all of it. There's always going to be some competition, but make sure that you have the metrics to determine, are we capturing the people that are raising their hand? And then from there, make sure that your brand is out there. So attending some of these trade shows and leveraging some of our expertise, the folks that sit on those committees, going to those trade shows, giving presentations about, hey, there's this new code, this is what we think is about it, et cetera. That to me is brand awareness and showcases a bit of that expertise. And that helps build us and get ready for growing that top and middle part of that funnel towards that demand generation.
right. One thing that happened when people were extremely fearful that the recession was coming, right? And I
Hmm.
think some people are still a little bit concerned is, CFOs went to the CMOs and said, hey, you're going to have to do more with less, right?
Sure.
Or do the same with less,
Hmm.
or deliver a lot more with the same, right? So there was
Sure.
this sort of this focus on efficiency. So, for those folks listening who are sort of under a little more of a budgetary constraint and trying to
Hmm.
do more with less. Are there any best practices that you found have been useful in sort of making decisions around budgeting?
Well, I think automate as much as you can where it makes sense, right? Because that's going to give you more time, and more time equals more dollars if you can allocate it appropriately, right? So if there's a way to utilize marketing automation, if you're not already using it, I think that's a big one, right? But that's kind of table stakes. A lot of people have that. If you can use AI tools in a certain fashion, now you want to make sure that you always have somebody at the end that is editing, reviewing, and making sure that it is appropriate for your business. But in terms of a time saver, I find that to be very time saving to get an idea on paper and then go about it and talk with your team and say, hey, how do we change this or adapt this to what we need? Because yeah, it's been fascinating to see that growth over the last year or so that all of a sudden you just type in a prompt and hit a button and you've got, I don't know, a 7-page document about ideas that then you talk about how does this apply to what we think because it just sourced the entire internet, distilled it into 7 pages for you.
Cool. No, great advice. Are there any things we should have discussed as it relates to sort of marketing in the next year that we didn't discuss yet that you would like pearls of wisdom or stuff that you're thinking about?
I'm always thinking, I know that you and I, we had a conversation earlier and you mentioned it as well, that I think that AI not only as a useful tool, but if we're not thinking about how it's being utilized today and how to prepare for that, top of that demand funnel in the future, then there's a significant risk there. That if you're not preparing to be captured by the AI crawling and searching today, then in 5 years, they're going to ask a question to AI and the only answer is going to be that answer. So you have to make sure that you're preparing to win there. So understanding the developments in that area. And I think we even talked about it. It's a bit of a black box as to how some of these models work. So making sure that we understand, great, if we need to have certain content online or we maybe have more video or more educational components to win in that area, that's an opportunity for us. And again, that might be next year, that might be 3 to 5 years, but to be ready for that, I think is very important.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. It's a growing part of did its SEO practice is nobody's really decided what to name it yet, but I think people are calling it LLMO, which is
Okay.
large
Yeah.
language model optimization,
Yeah.
which is the idea that, increasingly folks may not rely on a search engine results page or SERP as we would call it, and they're just going to ask a chatbot a question.
Hmm.
And then it's a winner take all scenario. It's not even,
Yeah. You get
people
closed
get to
out.
choose from links.
Yeah.
And a lot of the strategic work that's being done now, from a human capital asset allocation as well as content creation and the kinds of content creation that's getting done and being recommended has to do with, future proofing visibility
Hmm.
beyond the SERP, right? Beyond the search engine results page. Now, the good news is a lot of the things that you end up deciding to invest more time and energy into in order to future-proof your visibility into large language models falls across content marketing, traditional SEO, barnacle-based SEO, digital PR, and social media, right?
Hmm.
So you don't have to pull from any specific budget to do the right thing. You can both sort of like say, well, this works for social media. Oh, and it also works for education, and it also
Hmm.
works for, digital PR. And by the way, it'll future-proof our visibility hypothetically, right?
Right.
So when it comes to justifying things like that to a CFO or a CMO,
Hmm.
the good news is that a lot of the things that are best practices overlap with the things you should already be doing.
Yeah, yeah. Begin with the end in mind. We would like to achieve this, and then the components that'll help us today, if
Yeah,
we structure them right, we can be helped for that future proofing.
exactly. And the fact that, what you'll be doing has immediate value as well, right?
Hmm.
And so if
Hmm.
you can figure out how to, create a Venn diagram where the overlap is big, you're like, well, we should be doing this anyway. Hopefully it'll, accrue value in the future.
Yeah, most definitely. And the pace of change is so rapid that I think getting more things that are augmenting what you're doing now is only going to be beneficial.
Absolutely. Final question really relates to um, sort of CRMs, that have changed names, right? They used to be called Salesforce Automation, then they were
Hmm.
called CRMs. Now sometimes other names are being thrown in there, and they're overlapping into things like CDPs and data lakes, and these new brands are on the horizon, things like Snowflake, et cetera.
Hmm.
And B2B marketers, right? They sometimes have really long sales cycles,
Sure.
right? So they have to sort of think a lot more about, what data do we have about a customer, both on an individual basis, but also potentially from an account-based marketing perspective.
Hmm.
So how are you guys thinking about that? Like the having the right information on customers and making sure that you're getting them the right information as they need it,
Yeah,
without sort of being intrusive into their day.
most definitely, right? And getting more data around who is the decision maker and who ends up being the buyer within our or within our customers is super important to us. And like you said, it's a long sales cycle and it's a multi-variable one, right? You can have certain influencers and then you have the final decision maker, and over the course of 12 to 18 months, maybe that's how you end up making that sale.
Right.
So right now we're trying to make sure that we understand that as well as we can. And to me, once you get all that data, then you can work backtrack and say, hey, here's been the most successful for us. We don't have all of the tools that you had mentioned, so I think there's an opportunity to learn about those a little bit more. Maybe I'll watch a few more of these e-marketing association podcasts, learn from that. But there's a lot of opportunity, and as we grow and our budgets get a little larger because we have a little bit more scale and things like that, that could be something that we look into, because I think maintaining those best customers, as we talked about earlier, and really account-based marketing to try and grow that share of wallet is going to be a huge opportunity. So what's the best practice to do that? That's a great
Right.
question.
Cool, cool. Well, thanks so much for joining me. A lot of pearls of wisdom that you've shared with the audience, and folks will now have homework assignments to go do as they think through their own marketing plan. So thanks, Wyatt. Appreciate your time.
Awesome. Thanks, Kevin. Thanks for having me.
Kevin Lee's Power Marketing is available on all your favorite podcast networks. Kevin loves helping businesses excel at marketing. Having marketing challenges? Just like Santa in The Miracle on 34th Street, if Kevin can't help you, he'll know someone who can. Find him on LinkedIn, subscribe, or follow.